What does colonialism mean?
Well, like any term about human affairs, it covers a vast range. There's all kinds of colonialism. I mean, the worst kind of colonialism is what's called settler colonialism, like the United States or Australia or Israel now to a lesser extent. A settler colonialism, like the United States and Australia, means you exterminate the indigenous population. Maybe not 100%, but pretty close. So that's the absolute worst kind of colonialism. That's us. There's other kinds of colonialism which are less extreme. So we were talking before about Wilson and Haiti and Clinton and Haiti. Okay, it's a form of colonialism in which you effectively take over the country for your own benefit, get as much as you can out of it, drive the population into, destroy the agricultural system, drive the population into cities, all for the most benign reasons, kind of great economic progressive reasons. And you end up with, say, the earthquake that just happened. That's another kind of colonialism. Other kinds are, and there's many other kinds. Say take the U.S. and the Philippines, which happen to be an innovation in imperial history. The U.S. invaded the Philippines about a century ago. It killed a couple 100,000 people. It was vicious racism. I mean, these guys, unbelievable racism. People here weren't even sure whether the Filipinos were humans or apes. They were exhibited in international fairs and that sort of thing. I mean, it was just horrendous when you look back at it. Of course, all for the most noble reasons. We're uplifting them, Christianizing them, giving them civilization, the usual stuff. There were scattered opponents, people like, not unknown people, like Mark Twain. He wrote very sardonic and cutting anti-imperialist essays. Now, he wasn't hanged. He didn't have his brains blown out, but they were suppressed. I think they finally came out around 20 years ago in some scholarly edition that nobody ever read, Syracuse University Press. But they were there. There was an anti-imperialist league. But it just... All right, now what happened after you conquered it? That was the innovation. Actually, this has just been studied in a really magisterial book, great book by Alfred McCoy, who's historian of the Philippines, among other achievements. He's the first person to have studied in detail how they dealt with the population after they'd more or less, still haven't totally conquered them, still going on, but pretty much sort of pacified the country. Well, it turns out there was a major innovation in imperial history, which had a lot of consequences right till today in the Philippines and everywhere else. What was instituted was a very sophisticated, high-tech control and surveillance system. Now, the technology of then was not the technology of now, but it existed. Telegraph, radio, other surveillance techniques. Every technique was used that was available to try to control, monitor, subdue the population. There were also pretty sophisticated techniques of undermining resistance that were used. So co-optation of elites, spreading rumors, using every device you had to try to undermine the nationalists, and it was done very well. And of course, there's a mailed fist. In the background is the Philippine Constabulary, something which happens in every colonial imperial system. You have a, kind of a paramilitary force of collaborators, which do what you tell them, and they're usually trained killers. So, and you can set it up so, let's say you pick people from one tribe to kill another tribe, or use the rural population to smash the urban population. It's done in various ways. In fact, we do it right now, this minute. That's the way the U.S. is hoping to run the occupied Palestinian territories. There's a U.S.-run army that's supposed to subdue them, and it's highly praised by Obama and Kerry and the liberals and so on. So, anyway, this array of techniques was worked out in quite impressive detail and applied in a very sophisticated fashion. It still applies. Philippines is still pretty much under this system. The Philippines, which remains a kind of a quasi-colony, is the only part of East and Southeast Asia that has not been part of the so-called economic miracle. You know, take a look at Taiwan, South Korea, you know, even Indonesia and so on. There's been a lot of economic development, not the Philippines. They're pretty much under this system. That's the one part of the region that we still run. And there was an immediate blowback. Wilson and the British during the First World War used a lot of these techniques domestically, consciously. Could apply them at home too. Now it's extreme. So you go to Britain, and it's a surveillance society. Cameras on every street corner, you know, the allegedly anti-terror devices. I mean, here too, you know, Patriot Act. So it's a very, these are, and the U.S. applied them in other countries right away. So Haiti, Dominican Republic, you know, Nicaragua. Well, that's another kind of colonialism. And it makes a lot more sense than occupying the country. It works much better, it's cheaper, it can work very effectively. In the Philippines, it's 100 years, you know. It applies back, it develops techniques to apply back home for controlling and subduing populations and breaking them up and so on. Well, that's another kind of colonialism. In any event, to get back to your question, there's no answer to what is colonialism. It's just one form in which powerful systems subdue others, and they subdue their own population. There's nothing new about that. I mean, that was pointed out by Adam Smith. Like, you know, he's not a fool. I mean, what he pointed out and what the international affairs specialists don't seem to understand is that you want to understand how a country works, you cannot ignore the domestic distribution of power. He said, just pointed out in The Wealth of Nations, you want to understand England, which is his concern, you have to recognize that the architects of policy are merchants and manufacturers. And they set policy up so that their interests are very well dealt with, even though the impact on the people of England may be grievous. And of course, elsewhere it's even worse. What we call the savage injustice of the Europeans is horrible. It's basically a truth, enduring truth about power systems.
The British Empire in India, the cost of...
There was a cost to the British Empire.
Borne by the population.
By the populations there and by the population of England.
Borne by the population
And the population of England, who were also kind of colonized.
And redistribute the wealth.
You know, so it's a class war, you know. Okay, that's true, and that's true for just about every imperial conquest. And as I say, the most extreme form is just extermination, like settler colonialism.